Beijing for talks. But first, we're starting in the Estonian capital, Tallinn, where European Union leaders are gathering for a digital summit. They'll be talking about the opportunities of new technology, but also some of the risks of increasing digitalisation. Let's show you some of the details. Digital business is already the fastest growing area of trade in the EU, but it could be a lot bigger. The EU says almost $9.5 billion a year could be saved by removing barriers to data flowing across borders. But there are also huge risks. According to the EU presidency, by 2019, cybercrime will be costing $2.4 trillion a year. The challenge for cybersecurity is getting bigger all the time. It's estimated that over a third, 36% of the entire global population will be using a smartphone by next year. And these days, it's not just our computers and smartphones that are vulnerable to hackers. The numbers of connected devices is expected to triple over the next decade, as everything from household appliances to cars are linked to the internet. Now, this week, the EU police agency Europol released its annual report warning that cybercrime has risen to unprecedented levels. Its chief told the BBC that the response simply hasn't been good enough.
What's happening, therefore, is this professionalisation of cybercrime driving up innovation, leading to greater capability. In the banking sector, we're now seeing direct attacks on the bank networks themselves, no longer the customers, to manipulate card balances, to take automatic control of the ATM networks or bank transfer payment systems. This is beginning, therefore, to be a substantial threat to the economic integrity of certain countries. And I think we have to work harder as a law enforcement community, as an industry, to protect ourselves better against these very enterprising criminals.
Well, Stephanie Hare is Principal Director at Accenture Research and joins us now. Stephanie, we were hearing there from the Chief of Europol warning about the escalating dangers of cybercrime. Is the EU doing enough to protect itself, to protect its citizens? And if not, what more do they need to be doing?
Well, one of the things that the EU is doing, which is truly world-leading, is the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, and that comes into effect next year. And the reason that this is world-leading is that it really is going to incentivize companies to protect your data better. And that is what cybercriminals are after. So from May of next year, if your data isn't protected properly, companies can be fined up to 4% of global turnover. So the EU is doing the best that it can, probably compared to almost any country in the world or any region of countries in the world.
This isn't just an EU issue, though, is it? It's a global issue. Do we need to be doing more as a global community to make sure that individuals are protected?
We do, because the threats are coming from, as you say, global actors. And one of the tricky things about cybersecurity right now is we're seeing data fragmentation. So China has come up with its own cybersecurity laws that are pretty strict, pretty draconian. And then you have in the United States, we just had a massive breach last week, the biggest breach in US history, very, very sensitive data for 143 million Americans. There's no real legislation to help protect Americans, no recompense. So again, Europe is really leading the way, but it's going to require partnership and cooperation with other countries to really solve this problem.
So that breach you're referring to there, that was the Equifax breach, and we have had a number of big viruses this year, like the WannaCry virus. Those are the things we've been hearing about hitting large companies. But what about individuals? We were talking there about more than a third of the global population will have a smartphone within a year. More of us are using these connected devices, cars or fridges that are connected to the internet, giving a back door potentially to hackers. Are people being protected enough? Are people aware enough of the threats?
I think people are not aware enough, and part of that is because there's no real agreement on standards or certification or licensing even. And again, the EU is trying to take a lead on this, but again, these are very vulnerable devices, and it's also a question of the internet wasn't really designed to handle all of these devices. So is it a question of protecting your devices from the internet, or is it about protecting the internet from your devices? The threat could go either way.
Now, back in 2016, EU leaders agreed to having a digital single market by the end of 2018. Do you think that they can do that?
It's really ambitious. One of the things I admire so much about the EU is it sets itself these big strategic goals and then pushes to get there. We're looking at things like broadband penetration, going from 4G to 5G, which is the next big thing, and that's going to revolutionize everything. The fact that they're thinking about it is great, but this was also supposed to go up to 2025, so I think it wouldn't be surprising if there's a bit of lag.
Okay, Stephanie Hare from Accenture Research, thank you very much for your time.